I think this is the biggest weekend for ACC football in years. I've said that all throughout the offseason. Hello and welcome in. It's always college football. I'm your host, Greg McElroy, and we are so happy that you're here with us today. It is Monday. It is week one. We have a game to recap. There are a few that we could recap. We will resist the urge to go down that rabbit hole because I do think there's one worth taking a look at. We will revisit Iowa State's victory over Kansas State. We'll document that like we always do on our Monday show. For those of you that have never really been with us here at Always College Football throughout the regular season, we have an awesome Monday show. It's kind of a deeper dive. We might tweak it a little bit this year. Stay tuned. We'll see exactly how we're going to tweak it, get a little bit more listener engagement, make sure we are continuing to have great dialogue with the people that have made this show awesome over the last few years. So make sure that you continue to follow along on the ESPN College Football YouTube channel. If you've been with us here in the past, you know that we not just put out episodes on a daily basis, but we also will send out clip outs, some of the highlights of some of our full-length episodes. We clip them out 5-6 minutes at a time. So if we're not talking about your favorite team for 42 minutes or 45 minutes, however long we go, maybe there's only 6 minutes on your favorite team. That's what you want to listen to. By all means, totally support that. You can do that on the ESPN YouTube channel. We also appreciate those of you that are engaging on the podcast platform. That's really where a lot of our listener base comes from, and we want to continue to drive home that point. For those of you that are new to us, our schedule during the season looks as follows. Monday is a deep dive recap. Wednesday, we'll have a great guest, and we will newly release our rankings for that week. Sometimes it'll be a top 25. Sometimes it'll be our biggest movers, teams that might not have been in our top 25 the previous week. They've jumped into our top 25. We'll kind of adjust that as we go, because if the teams continue to hold serve at the top of the rankings and they're dominating everybody, then what's the point in giving you a top 25? Oh, hey, guess what? Texas is number one again. All right. That gets a little old after 5 or 6 weeks. So we'll kind of adjust that as we see fit. And then Thursdays, you don't want to miss our Thursday show. I'm just telling you, if you love college football, you love the games, maybe you want a little action on some of the games, that's the show that is absolutely can't miss. And then Sundays, we'll do a reaction show to what we witnessed the day before. So a lot that we need to look forward to, because from this point forward, it'll be 4 episodes a week. You don't want to miss any of them so that you are up to date with college football. We also have really challenged our listeners the last couple of weeks. A few years back, we've gotten slandered with our ratings. So we were a 5-star show for a year, 2 years for the most part, and then a team gets left out of the playoffs. And next thing you know, we're now all of a sudden terrible. I don't think that's necessarily the case. You guys have responded in remarkable fashion. We continue to encourage everybody to leave us a rating on the podcast platform of your choosing. And we want to pick out a few people that left us some really nice ones, I might add. Sayin gave us a 5-star review, College Football 2025. Schlipped, appreciate that. Georgia Ladybird, Chance Cam 103, Sarkart, Running Jen, Edit by Lauren, Single Speeder, Thunder Laugh 11. Even though Thunder Laugh 11 gave us a 3-star rating, we still love you. That's okay. Because when we were picking Michigan to beat Ohio State in 22 and 23, I bet we were a 5-star show. This year, we think Ohio State has a few more answers. I know they beat them last year. We did not pick Michigan to beat Ohio State last year. We got it wrong. We did. But guess what? We've gotten it right more than most media members the last couple of years, because we loved what the Wolverines have done here in transforming who they became over the last few seasons. Don't worry. I'm not picking that game just yet. So right now we're sitting there. Yeah, maybe we lean Ohio State in the preseason. Let's see week 12 where we're at. So don't worry, Thunder Laugh 11. We have a feeling you might come around. We appreciate you very much. We are going to dive in today to a few questions from our mailbag that we've been accumulating over the last couple of weeks. We want to answer a few of those. We also are going to give out Dude of the Week, which is a new little project here on Always College Football, a guy that really wowed us this past week. You get Dude of the Week. We also give Team of the Week. We're going to do that as well. And we will break down Kansas State and Iowa State. We also will break down a few other things as the show goes along. So make sure you keep it locked in right here. But let's kick things off with a full breakdown of the first big ranked matchup of this young 2025 season. It's Iowa State beating Kansas State 24-21 in a very hard-fought game in Dublin, Ireland. We all know the outcome by this point. We're 48 hours removed from it. So if you're just now finding out that Iowa State beat Kansas State on Saturday, then I'm just going to hope that you're a little more locked in this upcoming Saturday. That's it. That's all I can hope. I can only hope. I can't change people's behaviors. If you had a lot going on this past Saturday, totally get it. Week 0 is a little bit out of the norm, but it was a remarkable performance by Iowa State. This game came down to really a handful of plays, and most notably, it was 4th down. Pretty simple. You want to know why Iowa State won? They went 3 for 3 on 4th down. Kansas State on the other side, just 1 for 4 on the most critical down and distance in the game. And we've got to give some love to Rocco Becht, who delivered a really clutch performance. And while you might look at the numbers and you'll kind of look at it, 14-28, 183, way too many people get caught up in the stats, okay? The stats are not an indicator necessarily. Sometimes it is, but it's not always an indicator of superior play. The numbers won't wow you. But if you watch what Rocco Becht did on critical down and distance, that's why Iowa State won. He made crucial plays when it mattered most. He accounted for a bunch of touchdowns, right? 3 touchdowns overall, 1 on the ground, 2 through the air, including the 7-yard rushing score there in the 4th quarter to give him a 10-point lead. It's all great, all right? But the biggest moments of the game were the result of the grittiness shown by Rocco Becht. 2nd quarter, 4th and 1. They're on their own 44-yard line. They go with a QB lead. That thing is stoned at or behind the line of scrimmage. He rolls out of it, falls forward, converts a critical 1st down. 3rd quarter, 4th and 1. They're at the plus 46-yard line, so just on the opponent's side of the 50. They go speed option left. He keeps it, dices it up, slices forward for another 4th down conversion. And then late in the 4th quarter to put the game on ice. It's 4th and 3. What does Matt Campbell do? He said, I trust my quarterback. I trust my quarterback. I trust my personnel to make sure that they can basically end the game with our own offense on the field. Because, hey, what happened the last time Kansas State had the ball? 65-yard touchdown on the first play of the offensive series, right? Let's end it on our terms. Let's go for it. I trust my veteran quarterback. I trust my personnel. We're going to do it. They know pressure's coming. Here it comes. Here comes the interior pressure. Hey, free release Carson Hansen out of the background. Right into the flat, right there to the left. Boom, quick, easy throw for Rocco Becht. Completion, missed tackle, 15-yard game, puts the game on ice. Rocco Becht just has marbles. I don't know how else to say it. If you know the movie Major League, you know what marbles means. Rocco Becht has marbles, and I love the way that young man plays. You look at Kansas State on 4th down. They converted their first attempt, which is great. They allow a tackle for loss on the plus 7-yard line going in. That was another 4th down that was stopped short. They got aggressive on the plus 33 on 4th and 9. Good pass rush by Iowa State. Great coverage by Iowa State. Flushed Avery to the left. Incomplete pass. Went QB sweep on the own 30-yard line. Got stonewalled. This was a really impressive performance and a repeatable recipe for Iowa State this year. They were great and advantageous on critical down and distance, but they also held the ball. 33-52. That's time of possession to Kansas State's 26-08. That allowed them to kind of dictate the pace of the game, wear down that Kansas State defense, and that came to fruition as the game went along. Iowa State ran 74 offensive snaps in this game. K-State ran 57. 17 additional snaps that K-State's defense had to defend. That's going to take its toll as the game goes along. But they did a great job of affecting Avery Johnson. There were some good moments for Avery Johnson, but not enough. And Kansas State's offense as a whole was pretty inconsistent, especially there in the first half. They did create some big plays, but it was not ideal whatsoever. And Dylan Edwards' injury, have not seen an update at the moment about what that thing might look like long term, but we'll keep an eye on that for sure. So that being the performance, I know some could make a strong case for Kansas. I'm going to go with Iowa State. I think the way they controlled the tempo of the game, the way they affected the opposing quarterback, the way they made pivotal plays on 4th down, the way they extended drives, and the way they trusted their offense there on the field on 4th and 3 at the end of the game, that gets you team of the week in our world. So for week 0, the Iowa State Cyclones take home our team of the week. Let's go next to our dude of the week. Our dude of the week goes to Jalon Daniels, quarterback of the Kansas Jayhawks. Now, the numbers won't absolutely blow you away, but the efficiency might. 18 of 20, 173, 3 touchdowns, had 6 rushes and a scramble that went for 54 yards. He did get sacked, which led to loss of 7, so his total rushing yardage was about 47 yards. But if you watch this young man, he's so dynamic with the ball in his hand. He's such a great athlete, whether it's design quarterback runs or a scramble or two. There were so many times where I'm watching that game where Fresno looks like they have Jalon Daniels bottled up, like he's not going to do anything. They have an unblocked pass rusher off the edge, in some cases to the right-hand side, which Jalon Daniels is a right-handed passer. He can see it. He can feel it. He can adjust to it. That unblocked defender almost never made the play. He always made that guy miss, extended the play, or took off and turned what would have been a sack in some cases into an explosive play for some others. Man, he was amazing. One of my favorite plays by him came in the second quarter. He was moving to his left. His center pulled to the left-hand side, blocked the guy, but the guy actually had a pretty good pass rush. He stepped up inside and threw a dart over the middle. Now, the one thing I want to see from Jalon Daniels moving forward, what's been the question mark about him long-term? It's his health. He did take a couple big hits in this game, a couple awkward hits in this game. He's got to protect himself. But my goodness, what a performance. If he continues to play like that, the Kansas Jayhawks are a legitimate threat in the Big 12 this year because quarterbacks are going to move the needle in that league. They are, because the personnel across the board, the gap is not that significant. So if you have a quarterback that can elevate the level of the play from everyone else on that offense, you have a real chance. And I think Jalon Daniels, based on what we saw in week 0, his ceiling in the Big 12 is as high as anybody in the entire league. Very, very encouraging from what we saw from him. Just be careful when taking some of those hits. But our dude of the week in week 0, Jalon Daniels, quarterback of the Kansas Jayhawks. Moving into our mailbag, and we continue to encourage everybody to submit questions on our social media. Always CFB on both Instagram and on Twitter. If you X, whatever we're calling it nowadays, I don't know. On social media, always CFB. Submit your questions there, okay? We will answer them on the show. We've been stockpiling now for a while, so we're very much looking forward to answering these questions as the season continues on, because there will be tons, especially after week 1 and some of these games that we have coming up. People are going to be panicking. People will be freaking out. We can maybe talk you off the ledge, or in some cases, maybe we talk you onto the ledge. We'll see. Let's start with Matt in Kentucky. 4 of the top 10 quarterbacks from the class of 24 are starting this year. If you had to guess who will have more passing yards and passing touchdowns this season, Julian Sayin of Ohio State, CJ Carr of Notre Dame, DJ Lagway of Florida, or Dylan Raiola of Nebraska. What would be a good season for any of these quarterbacks, statistically speaking? Well, the original question was who will have the most passing yards. I think Julian Sayin will have the most passing yards. Now, a lot of this has to do with the style of the offense that they're going to play, and a lot of it has to do with this personnel on the outside. Tell me right now, are you taking Ohio State's weapons or Notre Dame's, Florida's, or Nebraska's? We'll just pause for just a little bit of a cliffhanger here. We all know who that is. It's Ohio State. Ohio State has the best personnel at wide receiver. They also, I think, have a really nice 1-2 punch at running back, but this will still be an offense that's going to create a lot of problems on the perimeter for every single team they play. So if we're looking at yards, I'm going to go with Julian Sayin. If we're going for touchdowns this season, that's a little bit more of a challenge. Are we accounting for big plays created? Are we accounting for guys that might struggle to run the football? Are we accounting for teams that are going to expect to throw it into the end zone with regularity? That is a tougher one. I'm going to go with DJ Lagway when it comes to touchdowns, because I look at how Florida is going to build this offense, and we know that they're going to be a ground and pound outfit. They want to run the football. But I look at how DJ Lagway performed last year off play action. I look at how often secondary players on the opposing defense are going to get caught looking in the backfield, and how DJ Lagway might just stick that ball into the belly of his running back. Those guys run up to stop the run, only to get beat one-on-one downfield with some receivers on the outside that have a lot of speed. I think Lagway will have the most touchdowns. Now, what does a good season look like? That's the second question from Matt. I think a good season for CJ Carr, we'll start there at Notre Dame, is keeping the interceptions down. That's the most important part of Notre Dame's offense this year. And that's what got CJ Carr into a little bit of a battle. Because going into the fall, we all thought CJ Carr was just going to run away with the quarterback job, didn't we? We all just anticipated he just has more arm talent than Kenny Minchey. Now, Kenny Minchey's dynamic with the ball in his hands. He can run, and that's a part of their offense that they've used in the past. It might still be a part of their offense they're going to use in the future. And maybe Kenny Minchey has a package or two where he goes in on 3rd and short, he goes in the red zone and runs the football. But what got this quarterback conundrum, if you will, into a heated battle was that CJ Carr was taking some unnecessary risks. He was throwing into traffic. He was doing a few things through the air that you don't need to do, because how did Notre Dame get to the national championship last year? They rode Riley Leonard's ability to manage the game. We know Notre Dame can run the football. We know they have a really talented group of running backs that they're going to lean on very heavily throughout this season. We might even see situations where there's 2 running backs on the field for Notre Dame. If I were them, I'd utilize that skill set with those 2 guys, Jadarian Price and Jeremiah Love there in the backfield. I think CJ Carr needs to keep those interceptions down. So if he's at maybe 6 or less, 7 or less interceptions over the course of a 12-game season, you got to feel really good about Notre Dame being able to win those games. Hopefully that number's even a little bit lower. What does a successful season look like for Dylan Raiola? I think comparable to CJ Carr, make good decisions and be efficient. This is a young man that loves to be able to spread the ball around. I really like his personnel at wide receiver. I really like the addition and the depth they have at running back. I like where they've moved offensively with Dana Holgorsen now calling the plays. I think Raiola is poised to have a great year. So I think a good year, statistically speaking, 2,800 yards, maybe a 25-8 touchdown interception ratio. If Dylan Raiola does that, Nebraska is a legitimate playoff contender. With Julian Sayin, you're probably going to have to do a little bit more. I think that you're probably looking at 3,200 yards thereabouts in a perfect world, maybe 3,000's pretty good barometer for tremendous success. 3,000 yards from Julian Sayin plus would be great. I think 25 plus touchdowns would be also very, very good. Young quarterback, can't make mistakes, much like the aforementioned 2. And then DJ Lagway. The big thing, I think a successful season for DJ Lagway is probably around 25 touchdowns thereabouts, 2,700 yards, but staying healthy. That's the most important thing for DJ Lagway as he heads into year 2 as the starting quarterback. Let's go to Frank in Charlotte. 3 teams with national championships have had some hard times recently. Georgia Tech, Nebraska, and Auburn. None are currently ranked in the top 25. Several are receiving votes. But out of those 3, who do you think has the best record at the end of the year? And do you think any or all of them finished ranked? The team that I think has the best chance to finish ranked this upcoming season is Georgia Tech. I actually would be surprised if they're not. They are number 2 in the ACC in returning production. They have a very veteran secondary. They did a really good job in the transfer portal to kind of bolster the front 7 and replace some key losses offensively. I love their quarterback, Haynes King. I love their running back, Jamal Haynes. They have unbelievable speed on the field. I love Malik Rutherford there in the slot. Really, really solid and experienced slot receiver that's played a lot of football for the Yellow Jackets. But remember this name. Remember the name Eric Rivers. He's a transfer from FIU. He's now going to be thrust into the role used by Eric Singleton, who left for Auburn this past season. Eric Rivers, though, I think has a chance to have a big-time season here for the Rambling Wreck. I also look at their offensive line. That's part of the question. They do have to replace a bunch of key pieces from last year, but you look at the schedule, they're favored right now in 10 of their 12 games. Now, this is way too early to be looking at who's favored week 10, 11, and 12, right? But the likelihood of them being an underdog or a heavy underdog is only going to happen in 2 games. That's against Clemson on September 13th. They'll be at home in that game. They'll be a heavy underdog against the Tigers. They'll be a heavy underdog against Georgia on November 28th. However, you look at the rest of their schedule, there's a real chance they're favored in every single game. The problem is that there's about 7 games on this schedule that I'd consider to be toss-ups. And when I say toss-ups, games in which I think Georgia Tech will be favored by 7 or less. Now, favored in all, but favored by 7 or less in 7 of those 10 games in which they were favored. At Colorado, that game's this week on Friday. They're on the road. Colorado's a completely new-looking team, a lot of new pieces to replace off last year's roster. They're going to be a slight favorite there. Can they win that toss-up game? Virginia Tech on October 11th, at Duke on October 18th, at NC State on November 1st, at Boston College on November 15th. You hear that? At Boston College on November 15th. It could be snowing sideways for all we know. Then they got Pitt at home on November 22nd. All those games, I think, are losable. Will they lose all 7? No, I don't think that's likely. I think they'll definitely win. Maybe more than half of those 7 games, which would have them somewhere around 8-4, which might have them in the top 25, which is a pretty good spot to be. But if they can run the gamut and win those close calls, this could be a team that threatens in the top 15, perhaps especially if they can maybe pull off an upset against Georgia or against Clemson at home there early in the season. I look at Nebraska, also a team I really, really like. I think a double-digit win season is real. It's a possibility for Nebraska this year. This should be, by all accounts, the best team of Matt Rule's brief tenure. Now, are there few concerns for me? Yeah, I'm a little worried about their front 7 defensively. They have to replace a lot there, and there's a couple of really solid players that might not have been first-round picks, but they were really solid for this Husker front these last few years. But I think they did a pretty good job in the portal, but I still need to see it. I do find it a little bit troubling that their defensive coordinator, Tony White, who has heard overtures in the offseason for a handful of years, I do find it a little troubling that he leaves Nebraska, a place where they were a top 20 defense last year, in favor of a team that went 2-10. He left for Florida State. That's concerning. I don't like the losses along the defensive front. I don't like that they lost their top 4 linebackers from last year. But I think worst case scenario, you're still looking like a team that could score with you now because their offense is now capable and the defense doesn't have to be super elite from the win some games. I also look at their schedule. They avoid Ohio State. They avoid Oregon. We all know, right? Lincoln, a very tough place to play. We all know that. It's one of the best home field advantages in the country. It's one of the most incredible fan bases in college football. They have 5 home games. That's a pretty good place to start. 3 of the 4 conference road games they have this year are also very winnable. They go to Maryland, they go to UCLA, and they go to Minnesota. I think they can win 2 of 3 there. So I'm not sure they're going to need to worry about bowl eligibility. The ceiling should be much higher this year. And if you look at Matt Rule's track record, he went 10-4 in his 3rd year at Temple. He went 11-3 in his 3rd year at Baylor. The floor for this Nebraska team should be at worst 8-4, which would have them in a really good spot to potentially be in the top 25 at season's end. Then we'll go to Auburn. I think Auburn is a really tricky team to figure out. I think they have upgraded their personnel across the board. I really believe that. From last year's team, which was solid, and if you look at their offensive and defensive efficiency numbers, they were really, really good. Now, they lost close calls. They made terrible mistakes when the game was on the line. They turned the ball over way too much in the first half of the season, but they really improved year over year from Hugh Freeze's first season to his second season. Now it's about really playing well in critical moments, critical down and distance, and not beating themselves. They beat themselves way too often last year. Now they have to take the next step. We're going to find out a lot about Auburn this first week. They'll go on the road to Baylor, a team I love, a team that I think has a chance to be one of the better teams in the Big 12. I'm not sure a ton of people that have followed the Auburn Tigers have a full understanding or an appreciation of just how good Baylor might be this season. They go on the road, first game of the year. Baylor knows it's a huge opportunity, not just for them, but for the Big 12 as a whole. To knock off an SEC team in the non-conference would be huge for the Big 12. So I think Auburn just needs to avoid the critical mistake, and they could find themselves in the top 25. I have them in my preseason top 25. I think their talent allows me to put them in my preseason top 25, but I have been burned before, especially last year, where the record was nowhere near as good as their personnel. Can they live up to their potential this year? We'll find out, because if they can't, that would be remarkably disappointing in year 3 for Hugh Freeze and the Auburn Tigers. We'll go next to Nicole in Lincoln. Since the start of the college football playoff, every national champion has started in the top 6 of the preseason AP poll. Do you think there is a team that is ranked 7th or lower that can win the national championship this year? If so, who? Yes, of course I'm going to tell you who, Nicole. Absolutely. Absolutely. There's a team ranked 7th or worse that can win the national championship. And for this, just because I'm going to allow Vegas to speak for me when it comes to this answer. Because I look at Vegas, and Vegas doesn't have bias. They don't look at conference supremacy. They don't look at the debate that is going on constantly between teams and coaches and fans and all this other stuff. Vegas is in the business of making money. So they put out power ratings, not rankings, power ratings. And those ratings help illustrate who they think would be favored on a neutral field against the opposition. Now, the top 10 are pretty obvious, okay? The first in the AP poll is Texas. Well, Vegas agrees. Their power ratings have the Texas Longhorns as the top team in the country. The second team, according to Vegas, is Ohio State. They're ranked 3rd in the AP, so we're all in line there. At 3, power ratings, Georgia. They're ranked 5th in the AP poll, so we're good there. Notre Dame is 6th in the power ratings. They're ranked 6th in the AP, and Clemson is 8th in the power ratings. They're ranked 4th in the AP. So there's your top 6 AP teams. They're all ranked in the top 8 from a Vegas power ratings perspective. So translation, the AP poll did a pretty good job. They obviously look at what teams might be capable of on a neutral field, and they rank them accordingly. Granted, I think Clemson should be a little higher. I think Penn State should be a little higher, but I digress. Not a conversation worth having right now. The question is how many teams that are ranked 7th or worst that can win the national championship? Well, let's go start with team that's ranked 8th right now in the AP poll. That's the Alabama Crimson Tide. Vegas has them 5th in the power ratings. Now, you look at what Alabama has. They have so much production back off last year. Their defensive line should take a significant step forward. That was a position that was occasionally up and down last year. Their linebackers should be more comfortable in Kane Womack's defense this year. Little different style from what they played under Nick Saban to what they played last year under Kane Womack. Those guys at the second level should be much more comfortable playing this style. And I think they had the best secondary in the sport. You look at the offense. Offensive line last year, especially on the right side, had some ebbs and flows. You look at the offensive line as a whole this year, they feel much better, I think, about their personnel and their depth across the board. I love their depth at running back, even though Jam Miller's banged up and will miss the first part of the season. I think quarterback has been the big question mark surrounding Alabama. And I look at Ty Simpson. And while his ceiling might not be as high as a Jalen Milroe because of Milroe's athleticism, I still think his floor is much higher than that of Jalen Milroe. You look at a few games last year where Jalen Milroe went out and just looked lost from time to time. The Oklahoma game comes to mind. The game against Tennessee where he made a couple critical errors. The game against Vanderbilt where he had a couple turnovers. Even though I think he played pretty well in that game, the defense was really what let them down in that game against the Commodores. So I think Alabama will be a better team this year. Also, year 2 in Kalen DeBoer, I'd be surprised they didn't take a significant step from a consistency standpoint. And by season's end, with the veterans they have back, they'll be in a position to go chase a championship in the postseason. I look at a team like Oregon. Vegas has them 7th in the power rankings, the power ratings. AP has them 7th in the rankings. Here's what I love about Oregon is that they can just weather the storm of the regular season. And I don't think the schedule is insurmountable. It's tough. They go to Penn State. They have a couple very difficult games, but the schedule, I think, was actually maybe a little tougher last year than it is this year. If they can weather the storm, this is about as young of a roster as one can imagine. If this roster takes a collective step and gets better, because what we know about young players, they have a tendency to get a little bit better and a little bit better and a little bit better as the season goes along. Now, you might have some really high highs, or you might have some really low lows. That's what happens when you play young players. But if this team can somehow avoid the critical error that cost them a game that they should win, they might be in great position going into the postseason with that young roster having gelled, having overextended in the regular season, and then their best football is actually right in front of them. So you get Oregon into the postseason, that's when they get very, very dangerous. So if they make the 12-team playoff, guess what? Whoever's playing Oregon in first round, second round, third round, from the first round to the third round, you're probably going to have a much better football team that you're going to have to beat. So I love the upside of this Oregon team. I think they can win a national championship, and yet they're ranked outside the top 6 of the AP. And the one that is the biggest discrepancy right now between the Vegas power ratings and the AP poll, the Ole Miss Rebels. Now, people will look and say, well, hang on a second. They had a really, really good roster last year. Well, Vegas had them like first or second in the power ratings last year. They were off the charts good. The problem is they made critical error against Kentucky. They couldn't convert a 3rd and short against Florida, and they really struggled there at the end of the LSU game. Remember, LSU did not lead in regulation of that game, and Ole Miss lost. They went wire to wire leading that game and lost the game on the field in overtime. I look at where they're rated in Vegas. Vegas has them 9th. The AP has them ranked 21st. That's a pretty significant gap. Now, there are some questions. Austin Simmons, their quarterback, not a question. I think that guy's going to be the real deal. I absolutely love their weapons on the perimeter. I think their wide receiver core, no one's talking about them. No one's talking about the explosiveness of this offense potentially. Their weapons have a chance to be as good as any in the SEC by season's end. I am a little concerned about their defense and all the great players they had to replace. I'm a little concerned about their offensive line, but the schedule is for the most part manageable. A lot of their toughest games are at home. They get 8 games at home this year. I think Ole Miss, Vegas probably has them right, sitting there at 9th. The AP might have missed by having them 21st. So that's another team that if they got hot and the defense doesn't take a huge step back, maybe they can be a player in the national championship hunt as the season goes along. Up next, Sam in Wisconsin. Sam, I love this question, by the way. With the SEC 9-game schedule starting next year, plus the requirement to play one opponent in the non-conference from the Power 5, right? Not in there, but that's what's missing. We'll put it in parentheses right there. One non-conference opponent from the Power 5. Do you see a day coming in the playoffs where an 8-win team makes it over a 10-win team because of a more difficult schedule? Honestly, in a perfect world, we would reward teams that play the toughest schedules. That's my answer here. Now, having said that, if you've lost 1/3 of your games, it's going to be very hard for me to make an argument on your behalf. You lose 1/3 of your games in the regular season to make it to the postseason, to me, is a bit of a tough pill to swallow. Now, I could easily see a team with 9 wins making it over a 10-win team. I could definitely see that happening, where a team goes 10-2, and next thing you know, hey, they didn't play anybody. Like they lost the 2 games against quality opponents that they played. So they didn't play it. So yeah, they beat 10 teams that they should beat. 10 teams they should beat convincingly, but the 2 games against top tier competition, they laid an egg. But this 9-win team, they lost 3 very, very close calls to an elite team. They beat a team from the non-conference that was from maybe let's just say the ACC. They beat them convincingly. And there are 3 close calls you could point to, maybe like a South Carolina last year where they lost 3 games, but they lost by a hair against LSU. Many people thought they should have won that game, but a penalty or 2 here or there might have flipped that game on its head. They lost close to Alabama, had the ball their end of the game, had a chance to win it, didn't, came up just this close. Did get blown out by Ole Miss, but regardless, I could see a South Carolina from last year maybe making it over an Indiana that went 11-1, but let's just say they lost one other game, and maybe that's why things will move in that direction. So yes, I do. To answer your question, I do think a 9-win team does have an argument to be made over a 10-win team, but when you lose a 30-year game and you're sitting there at 8-4 and you're trying to make playoff argument, to me, it's going to fall on deaf ears. I think you have to win games. I mean, at the end of the day, I know your schedule's tough. Go win the games. Simple as that. Because you're going to make the playoff. Guess what? You're going to play tough teams. And if you lose close, you don't get a do-over. Right? You got to win your games. So schedule should matter to an extent. And I know it still will, because wins and losses are always going to be how we judge teams, even though I think we'll go a little deeper when it comes to evaluating playoff teams in the future. Rich in Atlanta. Last year, it felt like Ryan Day was under a ton of pressure to win it all, which he delivered. I think James Franklin is under that same pressure, but with their schedule, I think they should be a safe bet to make the CFP. And we will see what happens there. Who do you think is under the most pressure to make the college football playoff? Lincoln Riley at USC, Kalen DeBoer at Alabama, or Brian Kelly at LSU? Here's kind of a way I want to kind of rephrase this. Who has the most to gain from a playoff berth? That I think is an appropriate way of kind of rephrasing this question. Okay, we'll do it one more time. Who has the most to gain from a playoff berth? Lincoln Riley is the answer to that question. Okay, so if Lincoln Riley, most people are saying, yeah, they're not going to make the playoff. I think they're in. I have them in the playoff this year. Now, am I rolling the dice? Absolutely. Could that thing fall flat on his face? 100% it could. And I'm sure I'll hear about it from all you wonderful people that love the show and love college football, calling me how dumb I am. I'm good with that. I could live with that. If Lincoln Riley makes the playoff, it'd be an incredible story throughout the college football world. It'd deliver proof of concept. It would acknowledge the fact that he made adjustments in his program by going out and hiring D'Anton Lynn, by going out and prioritizing the transfer portal defensive linemen and making sure that they got the best available. And I think they've improved that group across the board. We know they're going to score. Now, that goes without saying. Lincoln Riley's always scored, but the people have said, well, they're not tough. They don't do this. They don't do that. They won't play this way. They won't play that way. I think if Lincoln Riley makes the playoff, he's in a great spot moving forward because he could tell everybody, hey, look, I told you so. I know what I'm doing. Just trust me in the process. For Kalen DeBoer, it's still very early in the process. So while there's pressure to make the playoff at Alabama, of course, but I still think, first of all, I think they're getting in. I think they're going to get in this year. I look at their schedule this year. I think things set up very well for Kalen DeBoer and the Crimson Tide. So I think they'll make the playoff. But yeah, of course there's pressure, but it's still so early in the tenure. Brian Kelly has the most pressure to make the CFP this year. And going back to the question that we kind of rephrased it to, who has the most to gain from a playoff berth? Is Brian Kelly going to gain anything from a playoff berth? I think most LSU fans would say, well, of course you made the playoff. We look at our roster. Like, look at our quarterback. Look at where we've improved defensively. Look at what you hired to make Blake Baker one of the top paid defensive coordinators in college football. Like, you should make the playoff. I don't think there's a whole lot that's going to be gained by Brian Kelly making the playoffs. I think Brian Kelly has to make a run in the playoffs, perhaps, for people to kind of get off his back and prove that he is the right man to lead the LSU Tigers moving forward. So I think he has the most pressure, followed closely by Kalen DeBoer, followed by Lincoln Riley. But if the event in which any of those teams make the playoff, Lincoln Riley has the most to gain on the high side. Let's go to Krista in Los Angeles. The DJ Wingfield outcome shows the inconsistencies the NCAA continues to have towards player eligibility. When do you think powerful football will break away completely from the NCAA and govern everything themselves? For those that are unaware of this story, it's kind of flown under the radar a little bit, just kind of get you up to speed. DJ Wingfield is an offensive lineman, transfers to USC, tried to go get a fifth year of eligibility, but a U.S. District Court judge denied that injunctive relief, which prevents them from playing in the 2025 season. Now, Wingfield joined USC from Purdue, which is an interconference transfer, but that's kind of beside the point. He started his career at El Camino Junior College, spent 1 year at New Mexico, played with Purdue, and then hit the portal, became one of the top interior offensive line prospects this past portal. He started 12 games last year for JUCO. Now, part of this is the JUCO penalty rule. The JUCO penalty rule, which kind of gained a lot of traction with Vanderbilt quarterback Diego Pavia when he won a landmark case at the end of the 2024 season that granted a fifth year because the court ruled the NCAA's inclusion of junior college seasons towards its eligibility clock limited his NIL earning potential, right? So playing at the JUCO level shouldn't count. This is according to this court. It shouldn't count towards his eligibility because it was costing him money after the fact. Now, not everyone who's tried to go about it the way Diego Pavia went through it got the same ruling, though. So the precedent didn't apply to some other players that have gone through this. We see one at UCLA. There's been a couple at West Virginia, and obviously Wingfield at USC. So part of the problem with this is that the eligibility depends on what state you're in, which judge you get. We just need to stop and just think about that for a second. What state you're in determines your eligibility. What judge you get determines your eligibility. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not going to try to pretend like I know. But this is a national sport. The NCAA is a national organization. They should be the ones that are determining whether or not a guy is eligible or ineligible. Now, I know the NCAA is scared to death about getting sued. I get that. But eligibility should not be determined in the courts because it's state to state. we've learned that very much here in the last couple of years. It should be determined by the NCAA as the enforcement arm. And if they can't enforce eligibility, one of the simplest things in college football, then what's the point of their existence? So I do think here in the near future, the Power Four will separate. They will have their own enforcement arm, and they will make declarations about eligibility here in the future. I hope that's where they get, because right now it's way too confusing. And what happens in West Virginia isn't the same as what happens in California. And that to me isn't right. We got to figure this out. We got to figure it out quickly. Let's go to Justin in Texas. Expectations are high in College Station. I don't want to be unrealistic. And I think I know what a good season would be for the Aggies. But I want to know what you think is a good year for Mike Elko in year 2 at Texas A&M. I think Texas A&M should be a top 15 program this year. I look at what's back. The offensive line returning 7 deep, versatile, talented. I look at the quarterback growth that's expected in Marcel Reed. I think he's going to be a much better player. I look at the depth they have at running back, something they did not have all the time last year because Le'Veon Moss got banged up. They're about 8-9 games into the season. You lost Reuben Owens before the season. I look at the upgrades they made at wide receiver by bringing in Casey Concepcion from NC State. I look at the personnel that's just waiting for their opportunity along the defensive front. That group should not drop off significantly. If they drop off a little bit, that's to be expected. They lost some really good players, but they're not going to fall off a cliff. Second level should be good. Safeties, corners should be good. I think Texas A&M has everything you could possibly want to make a charge this year as a dark horse in the SEC. Schedule's tough. It always is. But I would not want to mess around with the Aggies this year. I think they have a real shot to make some legitimate noise and kind of flying under the radar here in the preseason. Pretty good spot to be if you are a Texas A&M fan. Let's go to Joseph in Idaho. I saw you pick Liberty as your G5 team in the CFP. What were you thinking? You're telling me that if Boise State goes 11-2 with a loss to Notre Dame, but a conference championship, they would be left out of the CFP? To steal a line from the SEC, quote, they don't play anybody, end quote. And the new Mountain West is a lot better than the new CUSA. I totally get it. I completely understand that. And in the scenario that you just laid out, where Boise's sitting there 11-2 as champions of the Mountain West, I think they'll be in the college football playoff. Now, a little bit that depends on how competitive are they against Notre Dame? Because what was it that Boise State had to hang their hat on last year? Not only did they play Oregon, but they were competitive against the Oregon Ducks. And while it was a loss, that was a pretty big feather in their cap, was it not? That kind of proved to everybody, man, Boise State's legit. They just went and played Oregon as well as anybody in college football last year. Remember, Oregon was the number 1 overall seed. They were 13-0. They beat Ohio State. The only other team that really played them close was Ohio State. And Boise went to Eugene and gave them all they want. So even if they lose close to Notre Dame, that could actually enhance their resume overall. So yeah, if they lose 2 games, win the Mountain West, I think they'll be in. But if they lose 3, that's when I think Liberty might get in at 13-0 over a team that's 10-3 in Boise. That is conference champs from the Mountain West. Just food for thought. Vegas has Boise State's win total at 9.5. They clearly believe that losing 3 is possible. I think it's possible. Now, where do we lose, right? At South Florida this week, Thursday at 3:30 Mountain Time? I think that game kicks off. That's what an incredible way, by the way, to kick off the Thursday slate. We got a bunch of great games on Thursday. We get Boise at South Florida at 5:30 Eastern Time on Thursday afternoon, evening. I can't wait for that game. And guess what? I think that is a very difficult game for the Boise State Broncos. I really do. Now, you look at temperatures right now, expected in Tampa, this won't be insurmountable. But if that thing, for whatever reason, storm rolls through and makes it 100 and the humidity's at 100%, maybe that gets tough for the Boise State Broncos. At South Florida is a tough game. That will not be a picnic. At Air Force, another tough game. At UNLV, or against UNLV at home. At Notre Dame. There are losable games on the schedule. And I look at what Ashton Jeanty was last year. He made Boise State look a lot better than they actually were running the football. There are a lot of unblocked defenders that Ashton Jeanty made look silly. If the running backs fall back just a little bit. I like the addition that they made for Fred. I think they're going to be fine at running back. But if they take a step back at running back, if the pass rush isn't quite as good, the possibility of them losing 3 is real. Now, would I bet on it? No, it's Boise. I love Boise. But I think it's real. So it's possible. I think with Liberty, if they're undefeated, based on what the committee did last year by looking heavily at wins and losses, they might get the nod over a team that loses 2 out of the Mountain West. Let's go to Devin in North Carolina. And great question here, Devin. Really love this. How important is week 1 for the perception of the ACC? If Georgia Tech, Miami, Florida State, Clemson, North Carolina, Virginia Tech, and Syracuse all lose, the conference will be fighting an uphill battle from a narrative standpoint until rivalry week. Well, could they become a one-bid league after week 1 if all those teams lose? I'll say this. I think this is the biggest weekend for ACC football in years. I've said that all throughout the offseason. The ACC, they got 2 in last year, right? But that was partly because the SEC had 3 teams with 3 losses, and Miami lost to Syracuse, what have you, right? The ACC got 2 in last year, SMU and Clemson. But let's go through the ACC schedule this week. Georgia Tech at Colorado on Friday. That could be huge when evaluating a Big 12 second team against an ACC second team. Syracuse against Tennessee on Saturday. Huge opportunity for Syracuse. No one expects them to win, but if they somehow pulled the upset, think about how that would alter the perception of the league as a whole. Bama at Florida State. Florida State, heavy underdog, but if they somehow pull that off, it'd be enormous for the ACC. LSU at Clemson. Clemson's the favorite. This is a game they should win. This is a game that most people expect them to win. If they can pull this off, it'd be big, even though Clemson likely will punch their own way into the field because they're going to be in a great spot at season's end with their overall win-loss record. Cal at Oregon State. If Cal loses to Oregon State, that's not good for the ACC as a whole. Virginia Tech against South Carolina. What if Virginia Tech goes and beats South Carolina, a team that's ranked in the top 15 here in the preseason? Notre Dame is going to Miami. If Miami beats a top 6, top 5 Notre Dame team, think about what that could do in increasing the likelihood at season end. Let's just say Miami doesn't win the ACC. Notre Dame's sitting there as an at-large possibility, and Miami has the head-to-head. That would be massive for the ACC. And then TCU at North Carolina. If North Carolina can beat TCU, where they are a slight underdog, that'd be huge for Bill Belichick, naturally. But it'd also be big to showcase the depth of the ACC. It would improve their overall perception in the ACC. The perception right now is that the ACC is top-heavy. They have 2 legit teams, but the bottom of the league over the last few years has regressed mightily. If they can somehow pull off some stunners this weekend with Florida State, with Syracuse, with North Carolina, with Virginia Tech, with Miami, perhaps, that'd go a long way into reestablishing the credibility of the ACC as a whole. And I think if they can do that, then that really exponentially increases the possibility of getting 2 teams in, just like they did last year. Okay, one thing we're really going to try to do this year is we're going to be a little more interactive with those of you that watch our show on the ESPN College Football YouTube channel. All right, because we see all the time people telling us how dumb we are, people telling us how bad our rankings are, people saying how wrong we are. We're going to start just taking some snapshots of where people believe we're getting it wrong. And then we'll call the segment, quote, hindsight is 2020. So there are going to be some cases in which you're very, very bold in our comment section. We will give you a round of applause because you got it right and we got it wrong. All for that. This is about accountability across the board, not just for me, but for y'all. And we want this interaction. This is great. So if you get it right, you get a shout out. If you get it wrong, you get a shout out. I get shout out all the time, wrong or right. So that's the beauty. We're going to have some fun with this. We want you to engage. We want you to follow us on the ESPN College Football YouTube channel. We want you to leave comments because we want to have some fun this year. This is not making fun of anybody. If anything, it's making fun of me. I might be totally wrong. And I will 100% be the one to read out those comments about how wrong I was. Cool? Let's start with Aaron Sutton, San Diego. This was a few days back. LSU from the big bad SEC is playing little old Clemson from the terrible ACC. They should win by 40, right? But they're going to lose by 10. Clemson's favored. Clemson is favored in this game. And they're at home. And frankly, Clemson right now has more known commodities than LSU. Like Clemson should win this game. Saying they're going to win by 10 is not very bold, Aaron. Like, I think you got a good chance here, if you are Clemson, to go and take care of business and kind of set the tone for Dabo Swinney here in 2025. We'll pick that game and we'll break that game down in its entirety on Thursday. So make sure you lock in to that show. Let's go next to RSCP Joe. I have not seen one person take Iowa State over Kansas State, and that is telling to the bigger narrative that people do not have any clue how good Iowa State is. They had season-ending injuries for 6 or 7 linebackers and still had one of the better defenses in the Big 12. You got it right, Joe. Well done, my friend. Excellent. Because I was looking at Kansas State last week thinking, you know what? Some of their explosiveness, just watching where Avery Johnson struggled the year before. He missed a lot of downfield throws. He was very inconsistent from an accuracy standpoint. I thought that explosiveness would lead to it being very tough for Iowa State to keep up, because Iowa State needs to be kind of a ground and pound outfit. They need to go a certain way for them to win the game. It went a certain way, and Iowa State dictated terms. They won the game, and deservingly so. And Joe, you get credit because you saw this before we did. We appreciate you very much reaching out, and you get a gold star for last week's prediction. Let's go next to HKN mile marker 33. The game to worry about is not Notre Dame. It's going to be too loud, QB too young, new defense. Notre Dame never did good at Miami. Run. The game to worry about is Virginia Tech and Blacksburg. That one in November stinks. Just abbreviating the word, changing the word there. It was sucks, but stinks, because we might have some kids listening. You know, it's for kids, and I don't want my kids to say those words, so we'll adjust. But this Notre Dame game is like Florida last year. 2 touchdowns at least, QB changes and doubt in the Notre Dame offense, regardless of what defense we have. But if the Canes defense is there, brother, absolutely slap. Love it. Hey, let's see what happens. I think Notre Dame's legit. I think Notre Dame's going to be really good running the football. I also, by the way, think Miami's legit. If you look back a couple weeks, I have both Notre Dame and Miami in my college football playoff this year. So I can't wait to see how this game goes. Like I said, we will break it down on Thursday's show. We will break it down in its entirety. I will not make a pick. Why? Because I'm calling that game. Can't wait to be there in Miami to call Notre Dame and Miami on Sunday night. Michael's Ledge, 3904. This has Bama 42, Florida State 17 written all over it. All right, Michael, you're on the list. You think a 25-point victory for the Crimson Tide? It could happen. It could absolutely happen. Florida State's still breaking a new offense, breaking a new quarterback. Quarterback's had some ups and downs this year. There are this offseason. We'll see where it goes. But you are on the list. You have made a prediction about what Bama and Florida State looks like. We will see if you're right here coming up just a few days from now. That game will be 3:30 Eastern time on ABC on Saturday. And then finally, at Bama Hater, 49-55. Alabama lost to Vandy and Oklahoma as the number 1 and number 4 team. Lost 4 total and finished 4th in the SEC. Why are people pretending Bama is a big, bad wolf in college football? They're not. Well, as evidenced by your handle, at Bama Hater, we probably need to take your opinions with a slight grain of salt, because if you look at Vandy last year, Vandy played great. Bama lost the game. A couple turnovers. Vandy played a perfect game. Bama lost. The Oklahoma game is inexcusable. No doubt about it. They did lose the close game to Tennessee, but guess what? Teams lose games. Like, you are different from one year to the next. That's why a team like Indiana can go from 3-9 to the college football playoff. That's why a team like Arizona State can go from a team that was 4-8 to the college football playoff. And frankly, give Texas all they want. So you can be different one year to the next. And for Bama fans' sake, maybe they will be. But Bama Hater, you are on the record. We will see where Bama ends up this year. We will save this comment. We will revisit it at a later date. That'll do it for us here at Always College Football. I encourage all you guys to continue to like, rate, subscribe to the show, wherever you get the show. Always appreciate very much the interaction that you guys have with us. Also tell your friends. We are covering the sport better than anybody here when it comes to college football. So tell your friends. We will continue to be here. We will have Booger McFarland on the show 2 days from now to help break down and set the table for week 1. We will also give you some big movers in our top 25 going into week 1. So for Mark, Jake, Jack, the other Jack intern, Sam, Rochelle, who's with us today, I'm Greg. We hope you have an amazing day, and we hope to be back with you again here just 2 days from now. Remember, it's always college football. Hey guys, it's Greg McElroy. Thanks for watching Always College Football. Make sure you like, rate, and subscribe to ESPN's YouTube channel and wherever you listen to your podcasts.